Let's talk about three main attachment styles right here: secure, anxious, and avoidant. How can you tell somebody's attachment style either on the first date or early on in the relationship? Thank you so much for joining us today on Second Act TV. I'm so happy to welcome back Dr. Gary Salyer, the author of Safe to Love Again. Gary, thank you so much for joining me today.
And thank you, Silky. Always a pleasure to be back here. Always.
No, it is. I love talking with you. You talk to a subject, obviously, that is on so many of our viewers' mind, and that is finding love again and making it work after 50. And that's what I want to talk with you about today, is that when you're out there, looking for love again, attachment style, attachment theory, that is something that everybody talks about now. That if you know your attachment style and somebody else's, that could really help, navigate a new relationship. So how can you tell somebody's attachment style either on the first date or early on in the relationship? The author here says that number one thing is the structure of early conversations. What do they mean by that?
Well, the structure of a conversation, I think, is what they're talking about. Are they able to give what I call ping pong, back and forth, or is it mostly about them? And it can be subtle. I mean, secure people are usually pretty good at giving and receiving, listening and asserting. They're usually pretty good at that. Now, if you're in a conversation where it's all about them, and what woman has not met that? I hear that all the time. But the avoidant is so tuned in, they're not talking about their feelings. They're trying to impress you just because they're not that connected. Mm-hmm. They tend to be on their own, On the other hand, the anxious may be working way overtime to make sure that you're like them. I think the guy made that point, and I think that's true. There's also the fact that you can show up too by how much they lean in. If a guy's wearing these black sunglasses the whole time so you can't see, that's another one. You can see some things in their pictures. But generally speaking, these three love styles tend to show up on a first date. Does that mean that everything shows up on a first? I wouldn't go doing a snap decision, but after 2 or 3 or 4 dates, you should be able to make a reasonable conclusion. Are they sharing? And the second point this guy makes is how much do they share their feelings? Mm-hmm. And that's true too. If you ask an avoidant guy, so how did you feel about something that happened? They go, well, I felt that whatever this thing was, and they'll give you some piece of logic. You won't get an emotional word. Mm-hmm. You can say, I really felt sad. He says, well, maybe you can try to do this next time, and you won't get an emotionally attuned response back. They don't feel you. Mm-hmm. Whereas the anxious will tend to go, oh my God, I was just like me. And then they'll suddenly go back into their childhood. I know just like it because my mother was just the same way, and my father was too. And pretty soon you're noticing that it's like it never ended back there.
Yeah. And I guess we should have prefaced, or I should have prefaced, that our own attachment style, or knowing our own attachment style, is key to making this work at all, by identifying somebody else's. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, how that matches up.
I want to say, you just said something very significant.
Okay.
I would love to analyze how many of these articles talk about what you need in the other person, what you're looking for in the other person, mm-hmm. not how you're showing up. Yeah. There was everything about how you spotted in the other person, but what about oneself? I mean, I'm surprised at how much we think we have a right to create these long lists of what we want in somebody else as if they're not going to want it back. Mm-hmm. So it's important that we do understand our own attachment.
Yeah.
That's really the key. You hit on something that's more important than I think you even understand, because most the advice out there is about finding it in somebody else, as if it's not going to, you're not going to show up and affect them. It's always about the other person.
Yeah.
Nobody rats themselves out.
That's such a great point. Such a great point. That yeah, absolutely, we have to understand ourselves first. Otherwise, none of this applies. And I guess what I should also say that nobody's doomed. Not one of these is necessarily better than another, as long as you understand what you're bringing to the table, right?
Well, I would say that the gold standard is the secure.
Secure.
We were born to have a secure. We had to be taught and trained and conditioned to be anxious or avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
These are adaptations.
Okay.
And what was once an adaptation for survival as a little one, usually, or in an early relationship, when that pattern continues, it becomes maladaptive. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to, hide behind walls if you've got a very intrusive mother or father. It's another when you take that defense into a loving, caring, and she can't ever get over your walls, or you can't ever get over hers.
Yeah.
So secure is the gold standard, but you're not screwed if you have the others. Good people have all of them. Gosh knows I've been there too. But the point is, and that's why I wrote my book, Safe to Love Again, was how do you get back to your birthright of feeling secure?
Right.
It's all adaptable.
It's all adaptable.
You can change this.
And yeah, Safe to Love Again, how to release the pain of past relationships and create the love you deserve. I reference it a lot. This is, terrific. In fact, Dr. John Gray endorsed it. I mean, it's it's a terrific book, and you are an expert on attachment theory, and that's, I feel lucky to be able to talk with you about this. The last one that he says here is personal dating history. That understanding, somebody's past, their relationships, their patterns, that's very indicative of what sort of attachment style they have.
Oh, exactly. I had a client, about 6 months ago say, I think I met this really cool man, and he's 63 now. He's never been married, never had kids. Do you think he'd want to get married? No, his track record pretty much says not. And a lot of times, if they haven't been in a decent relationship for 20 or 30 years, they are probably avoidant. Now, if they've got 20 or 30 years of serial relationships, maybe a few marriages peppered in there, but man, they're giving it the gun ho. That too says that there's an anxiousness there. I'm afraid of when love goes away. I've got to lock it down, always be in it. Both of those, it's important to notice the relationship history. And yet, I know of one of your very favorite coaches who's on here, and she and her husband never were married until their 50s, and
right.
Now they found truth. There are exceptions, but I will say, if you've noticed that somebody has not been in a relationship or has never been married or never had children, then they're telling you, their track record tells you a little bit how they're wired.
Yeah. On a side note, you brought up Treva. We actually did a whole video on that. Is not being married, never having been married, is that a red flag? And it is, or it isn't. It's sort of what I mean, it's something to think about. It's something to give you pause and think about if you want to get married. Do you agree?
Well, if somebody gets into past their 40s, 50s, 60s especially, and they've never been married, a secure person would have been on almost every instance. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me by that time there have been no chances. I'm twice divorced, right? Mm-hmm. But I think when someone has never been married, unless, unless they're the Dalai Lama and they've got a bigger purpose going on, right? Typically that doesn't speak well if you're looking to get a long-term committed relationship / marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't say anything bad about the other person. It's just indicative of you're probably not going to get what you want if that's what you're looking for, is a seriously committed relationship. Yeah. Well, with that as a baseline, then, how to identify the three, or at least, early on in the relationship, are there styles that make better matches? What should we know about that?
Okay. So this article that you sent me had this idea that, um, if you're secure, congratulations. And you can mix and match with any of them.
Yeah.
And I radically disagree with that. And not only because the secure will have what I call a full set of rights, a full set of rights to be welcomed and worthied and cherished and empowered. So they have more rights than to be with an avoidant who will dismiss them. So they don't feel so worthy, or they don't feel so empowered, or they hide behind walls. And the fact of the matter is the anxious can be just as preoccupied, but in a different manner. Now, so this idea that the secure can marry any of them, you could, but they don't tend to because they've got better pickers than that. They have rights from a more loving, consistent experience that's more attuned. But then, this goes back to a book called Attached by Amira Levine and Rachel Heller. Yeah, they give avoidance a particularly bad name. Said, but if you marry an anxious person, once they settle down and get trust and realize how secure you are, they'll make the most loyal of partners. Well, about 10 years after that, some researchers thought, I wonder if that's true. Let's try it out. And what they found out that was when the anxious and the secure come together in a committed relationship, that 68% of the time, the secure are pulled off their pedestal and they become either situationally anxious or avoidant.
Oh,
So
how interesting.
it's a good way, it's better for the anxious to come and the avoidance to come up to the secure. That's what I talk about, working on yourself. So I don't think that's very good advice for the secure. There's a little tad bit of codependency there, the way it would work out. Now, the opposite of this is when often two avoidants don't typically get together. There's not enough glue.
Yeah,
Now,
it says here they won't work on the relationship.
it dawns on them, it takes a longer time for avoidance, but it dawns on them something is really missing here. And it's the emotional connection. At first it felt like, oh my God, someone doesn't need a lot from me, but then there's not a lot given either. Now, they don't tend to stay together. The worst combination is put the anxious and the avoidant together. They're each other's worst nightmare. What you get is the classic, withdrawal pursuit, a pattern, where someone says, I got to withdraw, I got to get away, and the other one comes right in the room with them. You can't walk away from me like that. That's not good. What's best is to work on one's own attachment style. If you're avoidant, it's okay to learn that you can be safe in a way, and you can tell yourself to be safe in a way that it's okay to have all your feelings, to be able to attune, to be able to depend on somebody.
Right.
And if you're anxious, it's okay to let go of some of that past pain. It's, you can get out of the loop of constantly ruminating on it and being preoccupied so that you can genuinely be present with somebody else without constantly trying to manage them. How do we make sure they don't go away? Because the anxious do a great job of managing other people, and the secure and the avoidance, nobody, and even another anxious person won't like it. It's about everybody learning as much as possible to be secure, because that's where lasting lives.
Yeah. Well, and if you're wondering how to find out what you are, there are all kinds of quizzes available online for free. I'll link to, there's a couple good ones. I think you agree with me that, you can quickly self-diagnose, if you will, where you fall on the spectrum. I think it's fairly accurate. And, again, with, how accurate can you be about determining what a future partner early on is or isn't? I wouldn't over-pathologize this. I think you agree.
Yeah.
But there's some really great points here to be aware of. Gary, is there anything else that you want to add on this topic? There's so much to talk about when it comes to this.
The big thing underneath all of this, anxious, secure, and avoidant, and you got to get this, the heart and soul of a lasting relationship is the ability to make repairs, accept repairs, offer repairs.
Yeah.
what will make or break any relationship and what is the ultimate hallmark of a secure relationship, any lasting relationship, is to notice when, oh, wait a minute, their physiology, their head went back, the color went out, they look like they're a little miffed, right? There's been a disrepair. To track it in little tiny moments and to be able to offer that repair and say, gosh, I'm not sure that landed the way I thought. What are you feeling? And for the other person to accept, because when you know you're going to get over the fight, you can rumble and tumble without crumbling. That is the moment you know this is a pretty good relationship, and it takes a while. So the first, you're just noticing at first, are they in the general ballpark of someone who will eventually be able to tune and make those repairs? So I look at all this in terms of my work with couples, and what I'm looking for is how well can I trust the repair process? How much can they trust mine?
Interesting.
And if that's working out, then you've got enough physical chemistry and some value stuff. I think you've got a fairly decent relationship that you could consider. If the repairs aren't offered and they're not accepted, that's not the right relationship. And if you have a hard time accepting and offering them, the avoidants have a hard time offering them, the anxious have a hard time accepting them. Those are the liabilities. Those are the liabilities.
Lots to think about. I find attachment theory just really fascinating because in a way it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's really pretty simple. And then if you're open-minded to just seeing all that, it could work for you. Gary, thank you so much again. Again, the book is Safe to Love Again. We'll link to that. We'll link to the quiz. We'll link to all of your information because you do work with people remotely, right?
I do. I have clients all over the world. Yeah, it's remote.
Yeah.
We're all bakers, I guess.
Well, I'll link to all that, Gary. And I want to hold you over for another segment for Second Act TV.
Oh, wow. It's just like a scoop of ice cream.
Thank you, Gary. See you in a minute.
Thank you.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.